June 21st, 1582. Kyoto, 2 a.m. 13,000 soldiers surround a temple. Inside, 1 man, 30 attendants, no army. A page runs in screaming. Nobunaga wakes, walks to the window, looks at what's surrounding him. His first words, according to witnesses, "This is the end." He didn't say it with despair. He said it the way like a man who has accepted the outcome. Yet in this despair, he picked up his bow, fired until the arrows ran out, picked up a spear and fought until a wound made it impossible. Then he went inside, closed the doors and ordered everyone out. Then the temple burned. No survivors from that inner room. No body ever conclusively identified. We know what he did in his last hour. What we don't know is what he thought in those final moments. The Demon King. Alone. Burning. How did the man who came so close to unifying a broken nation end up betrayed in a burning temple? It all traces back to a simple philosophy. A philosophy summarized by a famous Japanese poem about a songbird. There is a poem in Japan, 3 lines, known to every schoolchild. If the cuckoo does not sing, kill it, Nobunaga. If the cuckoo does not sing, make it want to sing, Hideyoshi. If the cuckoo does not sing, wait for it to sing, Tokugawa. These lines were probably never spoken exactly this way, but they survived because they're true. Each one captures something essential about the man they're attributed to. 3 men, 3 philosophies, 1 Japan. Tokugawa's patience built an empire that lasted 265 years. Hideyoshi's cunning finished what Nobunaga started. Nobunaga's answer, kill it, ended with 13,000 soldiers surrounding a temple at 2 a.m. This is his story. The cuckoo that refused to wait. The question worth asking. Was he wrong? Nobunaga was born in 1534, second son of a minor lord in Owari province. He ran barefoot through market streets eating persimmons, wore his sword half-tied, talked to servants like equals and dismissed nobles like servants. His retainers had a name for him. Owari no Otsuke, the great fool of Owari. But his father still saw something nobody else did in him and made him heir. He died before explaining why. Nobunaga was 17, alone, surrounded by relatives who wanted him dead and retainers who thought he was a joke. Only one man stood between him and collapse. Hirate Mitsuhide, his veteran retainer, the man who had served the Oda clan before Nobunaga could walk, who had managed the territory, held the alliances, kept everything together while the great fool ran wild through the markets. In 1553, Hirate Mitsuhide committed ritual suicide. The reason is still debated, but most accounts point to a final act of protest, a message from a man who had run out of other ways to be heard. Shame, not his own, but the shame Nobunaga had brought to everything Mitsuhide had spent his life protecting. His guardian using the only language Nobunaga couldn't ignore. Nobunaga understood it, received it. He never explained what changed. He didn't have to. The great fool started paying attention. But here's what everyone around him missed. He never stopped being the fool in their eyes. They kept treating him like a joke, like something manageable. Something that could be controlled or outmaneuvered or simply waited out. For a man like Nobunaga, that wasn't a problem. That was the strategy. There was a young general in those years who served nearby, capable, cultured, watching all of this from a distance. His name was Akechi Mitsuhide. He saw the fool. He saw what the fool was capable of. And he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He chose to serve him. That decision made sense in 1556. and it would destroy him some 30 years later. But we'll come back to that. First, a storm, and how the great fool of Owari transformed into Demon King. 1560. Imagawa Yoshimoto marches through Owari with 25,000 men. He is everything Nobunaga is not: established, respected, connected to the old power structures that have governed Japan for centuries. His army is 10 times the size of anything Nobunaga can field. Every rational calculation says, submit, send tribute, survive another winter. Nobunaga's retainers begged him. His generals argued. His allies quietly prepared to switch sides. Nobunaga's answer? He performed a war dance, Atsumori, a famous piece about a young warrior who rides into battle knowing he will die. He danced it alone in the early morning. Then he called for his horse. 4,000 men followed him, most of them certain they were marching to their deaths. Then the storm came, the kind of storm that stops armies, rain so heavy soldiers couldn't see the man in front of them, thunder that swallowed every sound, lightning over the mountains. Nobunaga didn't stop. He found Yoshimoto's camp at Okehazama, resting in a narrow gorge, sheltering from the rain, utterly certain no attack was coming in weather like this. The battle lasted only minutes. Yoshimoto, veteran warlord, heir to one of Japan's most powerful clans, 25,000 men, was found trying to escape on foot through the mud. 2 of Nobunaga's ashigaru, common foot soldiers, took his head before he could draw his sword properly. The great fool of Owari had just killed one of the most powerful men in Japan. With a storm, 4,000 men. And the one thing nobody expected: the willingness to move when everyone else stopped. Nobody laughed after Okehazama, but they still didn't understand what they were about to deal with. In 1571, Nobunaga marched on Mount Hiei, the Enryaku-ji monastery complex, one of the most sacred sites in Japan. Centuries of history, the birthplace of Japanese Buddhism itself. The monks had made their choice. During Nobunaga's wars, they had sheltered his enemies on the mountain. Their 4,000 fighting monks were openly hostile and had ignored every request to disarm or remain neutral. Repeated messages received no response, so Nobunaga removed them entirely. 30,000 men surrounded the mountain. They moved slowly upward, killing everyone they came across, burning every building. By nightfall, the main temple of Enryaku-ji was burning. Many of the monks leapt to their deaths in the flames rather than be taken. Every building, every person, everything. His own generals told him it was too far. He overruled them. Then he took the title his enemies gave him, the 6th Heaven's Demon King, and used it as his personal seal. He didn't reject the name. He weaponized it. Mitsuhide was there. He commanded part of the force that day. He never wrote about what he saw on that mountain. He didn't have to. When a man watches in silence, it tells you everything. But here is the most contradicting thing about Nobunaga. Between the battles, between Okehazama and the burning of Mount Hiei, he was also building a new Japan. He abolished the toll barriers strangling trade, opened free markets, rakuichi rakuza, free guilds, free trade, no monopolies. Merchants who had never known prosperity suddenly found it. And then the arquebus. European firearms had existed in Japan for decades by 1575. Most warlords treated them as novelties, useful occasionally, but no match for the mounted samurai warrior who had defined Japanese warfare for centuries. Nobunaga disagreed. At Nagashino in 1575, Takeda Katsuyori's cavalry charged, the most feared mounted force in Japan. Men who had never been broken on a battlefield. Proud, ferocious, certain. Nobunaga had lined 3,000 arquebusiers in rotating volleys behind wooden barricades. The cavalry never reached the line. One of Nobunaga's generals, watching from behind the barricades, later wrote that he felt like he was watching a dream end. Not their dream. Japan's dream. The dream of the samurai warrior on horseback as the decisive force in battle. The image that had defined what it meant to be powerful in Japan for 200 years. Gone in an afternoon. The general wrote that the silence afterward was the strangest thing. Men who had just won, standing in the smoke, unable to speak. Because they didn't yet have words for what they'd done. Then, Azuchi Castle. He chose the site personally, shores of Lake Biwa, every major road in central Japan visible from its walls, 7 stories, painted gold, European construction techniques fused with Japanese aesthetics, art on every surface. Not military decoration, but actual art. Poetry carved into the beams. Gardens designed for contemplation, not ceremony. An attendant who saw it for the first time wrote that he stood at the gate for a long time before he could go in. He wrote, "I felt I was looking at something that had never existed in Japan before." He wasn't wrong. Nobunaga wasn't conquering Japan. He was replacing it with something new. Something that had never existed before him and couldn't exist without him. Mitsuhide built part of that castle. His name is in the records. He also served a man who had burned down an institution on the mountain the year before. That is what it meant to serve Nobunaga. Akechi Mitsuhide had served Nobunaga for over a decade by the time the humiliations began. Capable, cultured. A general who wrote poetry and understood politics and warfare with equal sophistication. By most measures, one of Nobunaga's most valuable men. But value to Nobunaga always came with strings attached. The most cited incident, a banquet. Mitsuhide's banquet, hosted for important guests. Mitsuhide had prepared carefully. This was the kind of occasion a cultured man took seriously. Nobunaga arrived, looked at the preparations, and in front of everyone, dismissed them. Dismissed Mitsuhide. Made clear that the host of this banquet was beneath the occasion. Then he replaced Mitsuhide as host with someone else. At Mitsuhide's own banquet, there were other incidents. A public beating. Accounts differ on whether Nobunaga struck him directly or ordered it. Territory promised and then reassigned without explanation. Campaigns planned and cancelled at the last moment, leaving Mitsuhide exposed. None of these alone would be enough. Together, they were a door closing between them. 1 degree at a time. 1 humiliation at a time. Each one witnessed, each one remembered, by Mitsuhide, by everyone who stood in that room, by everyone who would hear about it afterward. A retainer who witnessed one of these incidents wrote that Mitsuhide's expression never changed. He bowed. He withdrew. He said nothing. And that, the retainer wrote, was exactly what frightened him. A man who says nothing has made a decision. He's just waiting for the moment. There are theories about what finally pushed Mitsuhide to act. Political calculation, Nobunaga was consolidating power fast enough that Mitsuhide's position was becoming redundant. Loyalty to the emperor, Nobunaga's growing authority threatened imperial relevance. Simple opportunity. The target was exposed, the moment was perfect, and windows close. All of these were probably true. But underneath all of them, something simpler. A man of culture and pride. Serving a man who used culture as performance and treated pride as weakness. A door that had been closing for years, finally, closed. Nobunaga had spent 30 years removing every obstacle in his path. In doing so, he had built one he couldn't see. What does a man like Mitsuhide do when the door closes completely? He opens a different one. June 21st, 1582. Mitsuhide moved 13,000 men toward Kyoto under the cover of a campaign assignment. His men didn't know the true target until the last moment. When they were told, some accounts say there was silence, then compliance. A general who had decided, men who followed. Nobunaga had 30 attendants. He fought until he couldn't. The temple burned. 13 days later, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who was supposed to be on campaign far to the west, received the news. Force marched his army back at a pace that shocked his own generals. Arrived before Mitsuhide had consolidated anything. The Battle of Yamazaki lasted 1 day. Mitsuhide fled. 3 days after that, a farming hamlet outside Kyoto, a group of farmers with bamboo spears. Accounts differ on the details. They agree on the outcome. The man who ended Oda Nobunaga was killed by someone whose name history never recorded. 13 days. The most dramatic betrayal in Japanese history lasted 13 days. Hideyoshi, Tokugawa. The other two in the Cuckoo's poem. Their stories are coming to this channel. If you want to know what Nobunaga built and who eventually heard Japan sing, it'll be here. Hideyoshi finished the unification. Tokugawa locked it in for 265 years. The Japan you recognize today, its roads, its trade networks, its professional armies, its castles, built on foundations Nobunaga laid, yet his name on none of it. History gave him one image, the Demon King. The man who burned the monastery, who executed without hesitation, who laughed at traditions that had stood for centuries and replaced them with something that had never existed. History recorded every act of violence, every burned building, every executed general. But this is also the same Demon King that freed the merchants, destroyed the barriers strangling the country, institutionalized his military, built the castle on Lake Biwa that made men lose their ability to articulate. Both were Nobunaga, and history only remembered one of them. There is a poem, A Cuckoo That Won't Sing. 3 answers. Nobunaga's answer, kill it. He had never considered that someone might give him the same answer. Hideyoshi heard Japan sing. Tokugawa heard Japan sing. The man who made it possible died in a burning temple, with 30 attendants and no regrets anyone recorded. The cuckoo that refused to wait died before it heard Japan sing.